Another key element, key discovery in psychology, which comes from Gestalt psychology, is the idea of cognitive limits. So the idea that our awareness or our consciousness is limited. So at any given moment, take the example of this classroom. There is an infinity of things you could be focusing on. You could be looking at the projector and the hum that it's making, maybe feeling its heat, right? You could be lost in contemplation of the different grains of your table, right? You could be focusing on these stains on the floor. You could be looking at the window, at the winds, moving these leaves and these branches there. You could be focusing on what you're feeling inside your body, whether you're feeling hungry or whether your back hurts. You could be focusing on what I'm saying when those slides read. So there's an infinity of things you could be focusing on. And yet, you already filter most of the stuff that I was talking about, the winds blowing there, out. So that's a key aspect, because you cannot take it all in. It's not possible for us to take everything in. There's too much things going on, too much reality out there. So we need to, first thing that we do is filter out what is not relevant. So the cognitive limit that has been found by Gestalt psychology is 7 plus or minus 2 things. So at Gestalt, we have, I'm aware that we have these 2 German students here, and Gestalt is a German word that is very hard, it's hard to translate in English. A simple, one way to translate it is to say it's a whole by itself. It's a unit that is a whole. That's kind of one way of thinking of a Gestalt. So 7 plus or minus 2 means that we cannot have in our conscious mind more than 7 different objects at the same time, plus or minus 2. So between 5 and 9. Right? So if I have a great capacity for awareness, I can, what this would mean is if I looked at the whole class, if I stand out and look at the whole class, we have 16 students here, I cannot keep track of what every single one of you is doing. It's too much for me to take in. Now, if I restrict myself to, about 7 students or 9, if I restrict myself to that and I let my gaze rest on you, I can somewhat keep track of what you guys are doing. So that's sort of like the notion of cognitive limit. So in this model, awareness is kind of like a spotlight that you shine in the dark. Reality is kind of a cavern that's entirely dark, and there's lots of things happening in it, and we can't focus on all of what's happening. So we focus our attention only on what we think is the most relevant aspects of reality at this moment. All right? And that's because the consciousness is a limited capacity, and it's very important to decide where we spend it. So how do we decide where we focus our conscious attention? How do you decide what you should be paying attention to? Like right now, how do you decide what you should be paying attention to? Yes?
I think we're kind of trained
to right. So you have this very long experience of being at school and sitting at a desk, and do you remember? Do you have any memories of like the first time you went to school? No? Like when you first went to school, you probably didn't want to sit at a desk and listen to somebody blah-blahing for hours, right? So, but eventually, like you were socialized to put your attention in certain places. So socialization, experience, right? How else do we decide how we focus our? Yes. So our instincts, there's an instinctual aspect to how we direct our attention. And you said like, what's most interesting? So, and I would continue to push down a little bit and say, what's interesting? What is interesting to you at a given moment?
Like
Yeah.
something that stimulates our senses, maybe something like
Uh-huh.
moving, talking, or
So our senses help us determine what's interesting or what's attractive, what we should pay attention to, right? So like things like loud noises, if we hear, that perks us, we're like, whoa, what's that noise? There was a big sort of like sensation, and I better investigate that. I better check it out, right? If you heard a plane roaring down like it's going to crash into the building, right, you're going to look out the window and ask yourself, what is that noise, right? If you hear something that sounds like a shotgun, sometimes we hear like the trains passing by, they make those noises that you're like, whoa, what's that? So evolutionary psychology is one of the branches of psychology that tells us how we focus our attention. And a key aspect is we tend to focus our attention on threats and opportunities. And that's, because it's based on evolutionary theory, the fundamental concept is we've learned to focus our attention on what maximizes our survival. So how do we maximize and allows us to thrive? So maximizing survival involves recognizing and evading threats or managing threats, and recognizing and managing opportunities. So it's a very binary, basic aspect of survival. So, for example, a snake, there's been experiments that have been done that show that we react to subliminal images of snakes with fear, even without knowing what we've seen. So so there's been experiments where you have people look at a computer screen and you have an image of a snake that's flashed so fast that you can't see it, and then something else appears, right? And then you measure how fearful they were, and you will find that they react with fear. They experience fear when they've seen the picture of the snake flashing, even without knowing that they've seen the snake. And imagine why that is. You walk in you have to imagine yourself how we developed our senses, or our instinct, is based on, it was a long time ago, the time when much before this modern environment that we live in. So imagine the hunter-gatherers. You walk around the thing, you walk around the path, or there's no path, you're walking around and you see a snake. You have to jump right away out of the way, because if you don't, you could be beaten, and it could be your life is threatened. So we're wired to react very, very strongly before we ever consciously realize what's going on. By the way, there's research that shows that we are more sensitive to threats than to opportunities. So we're more likely to react to threats than opportunities because they're more costly to us. So in other words, if you have a source of food available to you right there, which means survival, right? And you have a grizzly bear in the surrounding, you'd better react more to the bear, because if you're killed by the bear, then game over, right? Than the opportunity. So opportunities, obviously in evolutionary psychology, there's a lot of emphasis on sexuality, sexual attraction, how we, that reproduction is central to evolutionary psychology, to the theory of evolution. So the key principle in evolutionary psychology is we are attracted to any behavior that allows us to survive and thrive personally, but also to maximize the survival of our gene pool. So we're wired to want to reproduce, to find as many suitable mates as possible within, and to have offspring that will survive. They will have the best characteristics for survival. And so that's, there's a whole chapter of, field in evolutionary psychology that explains differences between men and women in what kind of mates they find attractive. Men and women are not attracted to the same kind of mates. They don't look for the same kind of characteristics. So if you're interested in that, you can check this out. But this also explains why we're attracted to fast food, like fat and proteins and all that, which which give us an edge in the long term. So really, this is one of the filters, one of the instinctive filters about where we direct our attention, which is completely unconscious, right? So some attractive, this guy or this girl walk into the room, right? Everybody's like, eyes goes to them, right? People are like, whoa, check that out. So that's sort of like we don't consciously decide that we're going to direct our attention to that. The same as loud noises, which represent threats, direct our attention. The particular smells, particular colors, particular shapes that are associated with our survival direct our attention.